Welcome children. In video 5 I'll be dealing with the topic adaptation. So what is adaptation? Adaptation is any attribute of an organism. It can be physiological, morphological, behavioral or biochemical attribute that enables the organism to survive and reproduce in its environment successfully. Now I am going to analyze different environments and see how the different organisms are getting adapted. Usually these environments are hostile or extreme. The first environment we can analyze is a acidic environment where water scarcity is the hostile condition. Here taking the case of cactus, kangaroo rat and the lizard, desert lizard. Let's see how these organisms cope to the stress that is available, that is water scarcity. Cactus, we are all aware what are the different adaptations, mainly morphological adaptations. What are the different morphological adaptations? The leaves are reduced to spines, so to reduce transpiration. Second, the stem becomes fleshy and green. Fleshy to store water and green to undertake photosynthesis. What about the stomata? The stomata are located in sunken pits, so they are deeply located, they are not superficial. Fourth, the entire plant is covered with thick layer of cuticle. This prevents the plant from drying. So these are the 4 morphological adaptations found in cactus. Besides that, there is a physiological adaptation. The pathway, the photosynthetic pathway is not C3 or C4, it is the CAM pathway. In this photosynthetic pathway, the stomata opens only during the night time. So this is a measure to control transpiration. If it opens during the daytime, what happens? All the water will get evaporated. So it opens the stomata during the night time, during which carbon dioxide is taken. It's stored in the form of malic acid and byproduct is obtained, and during the daytime in the presence of sunlight the complete synthesis of glucose takes place. Only thing, the opening occurs only during the night time. It's avoiding the daytime. The daytime all the stomata are closed. So this prevents transpiration. So this is the case of cactus. So we saw how cactus is coping to the environmental stress, that is water scarcity. There are 4 morphological adaptation along with 1 physiological. Next, kangaroo rat of the North American desert. See the kangaroo rat, it meets its water requirements by the internal oxidation, fat oxidation, where the byproduct is water, 1, and 2, it does not lose water in the form of urine. So minimal water is lost. The urine that it excretes is very concentrated. Therefore, water is not lost as urine. So these are the 2 physiological adaptations employed by kangaroo rat. Once again, how it meets the water requirement? By internal fat oxidation, where water is the byproduct. And second, the ability to concentrate urine. It has the ability to concentrate urine. So water is not lost. So these are the 2 physiological adaptations of kangaroo rat. It's able to cope to that environment. Next, lizard, the desert lizard. So we saw cactus showing lots of morphological adaptations, kangaroo rat showing physiological adaptation. Now we can see the desert lizards. How do they cope to the environmental stress? Here these lizards lack morphological adaptations as well as lacks physiological. Then how do they cope? They opt for or employ behavioral adaptations. The behavior is like this. During it basks in the sun when the temperature drops. So when it basks in the sun, it absorbs the heat, and once it gets the comfort zone, it moves into the shade. So it moves into the shade when the temperature drops, or when the temperature is scorching hot, it moves into the shade. So that's a behavioral adaptation, basking in the sun to absorb the heat, therefore to rise its body temperature, and move into the shade when the temperature is very high to bring down the body temperature. So that's a behavioral adaptation. Some lizards are even burrowing also. They show burrowing habit. That is, to escape the heat of the above soil, they live in burrows. We have the desert rats also in this category, as well as the desert snakes. But in the text, the examples given are the cactus showing a lot of morphological adaptations, kangaroo rats showing physiological adaptation, and the desert lizard showing behavioral adaptations. So now from Zurich we will move to the next environment, frigid environment, where the environment is very, very cold, the polar regions. Now in the polar regions, usually the mammals, see, look at this is a polar wolf. Look at the ears. It has short ears and limbs. Look at the length of the limbs. The limbs are also short. So very importantly, they have short ears and short limbs. In comparison to the tropical wolf, look at the tropical wolf. Look at the ears, very long ears. And look at the limbs, very lengthy limbs. Limbs and ears are long, unlike the Arctic wolf or fox. Why? This is a measure to minimize heat loss. We have learnt Allen's rule. As per Allen's rule, what does Allen's rule state? Heat loss or heat gain is a function of the body surface. The larger the surface area, the greater is the heat loss. So by minimizing the surface area, the heat loss can be minimized. Clear? But here see, the surface area is increased because of the long limbs and long ears. The surface area is increased, and larger surface area means larger heat loss or greater heat loss. Whereas here they cannot afford to lose the heat. They have to maintain the heat in their body, cannot be lost. So for that they have their ears and limbs very short to minimize heat loss, which follows the Allen's rule. Heat loss or heat gain is a function of the body surface. Moving on to the next example of the frigid region is the seal. You see the seal in the lakes of Antarctica on the polar regions. Now these are able to survive because below the skin there is a layer of fat, and that layer of fat is known as the blubber, which serves as an insulator. It enables to conserve the heat. Heat loss is minimized. The blubber holds the heat. It's just like a sweater. It gives an insulation. So these are the two examples to indicate adaptations in the frigid environment. Once again, the wolf or the fox or mammals as a whole found in the Arctic region or polar region have short ears and short limbs to minimize heat loss. Then the seal, beneath the skin or below the skin, there is a layer of fat called blubber, which serves as insulators. Now from the frigid region, we will move to another hostile region, the aquatic environment. Not the normal aquatic environment. We are going to see the environment where it is frozen, the lakes which are frozen. Just imagine lakes which are frozen, covered fully with snow and ice. How will the fish survive? Have you ever thought? Usually the fish get frozen and become stiff, but here the fishes are very agile, they move swiftly, and not only that, the consistency of the blood is fluid, it's not getting clotted. How? This is because of a biochemical adaptation. So here comes the biochemical adaptations. So far we dealt with morphological and physiological and behavioral adaptation. Now we are into biochemical adaptations. The first biochemical adaptation is with respect to the fishes of the frozen lakes of the polar regions, Antarctic, Arctic regions. They have certain biochemical structures, some chemicals in their body that enables the blood to be in the liquid form. It does not get clotted or does not become stiff. They are very agile and very swift moving in spite of the very cold temperature which is below 0 degrees Celsius. You can imagine. But then too the body the consistency of the body fluid is liquid. The reason is because of a biochemical called antifreeze proteins present in their blood. These antifreeze proteins prevent the blood from clotting or freezing. So that's how they survive or cope with this hostile condition, that is ice covered lakes. Now, the second example of biochemical adaptation is the benthic fishes. Fishes and invertebrates living at the sea floor or in the ocean bed. What is the difficulty or the challenge they face? It is the crushing pressure. The pressure is very high, nearly more than 100 times higher than the atmospheric pressure. The pressure on them of the water column is 100 times more than the atmospheric pressure. But how do they live or they cope with that environment where they have to cope with the very crushing pressure? This is because of certain enzymes present in their body which enables them to cope with this crushing pressure, which is more than 1000 times than that of the atmospheric pressure. Not only that, we all know that these organisms do not have a swim bladder or air bladder, that is, they are devoid of that, and they have other shapes to survive in the deep ocean, but mainly it is because of this biochemical that is enabling them to cope with the crushing pressure of the water column. So, the two cases of biochemical adaptation: antifreeze proteins present in the fishes of the polar lakes or Antarctic frozen lakes. Similarly, enzymes present in the benthic. Benthic are the deep ocean forms. It can be fishes or invertebrates. How are they surviving or coping with the crushing pressures? Due to an array of enzymes that enables them to cope with this pressure. And of course, no swim bladder. Now, another case is that of hostile environment, and we are very familiar of the bacteria. We know about the bacteria. It has a simple body design and can survive anywhere, and mainly which bacteria? The archaea bacteria, the ancient bacteria. They have the ability to survive in very hostile conditions, in the acid conditions, in places where there is acid, in places where it is very saline, and also in the hot springs and hot thermal vents. In spite of the temperature being more than 100 degrees Celsius, boiling temperature, they are able to survive. Why? Because of a protein called thermostable protein. So once again I am reiterating with respect to the thermophiles, the archaea bacteria, the thermophiles, that is the bacteria that is present in the hot springs and deep sea thermal vents. How are they thriving there? That is because of this is also a biochemical adaptation due to the presence of thermostable proteins found in their cell wall. The cell wall is very special. It enables them to thrive in these hostile environments. This is the case of hot springs or thermal vents where the temperature is more than 100 degrees Celsius. Even we have the archaea bacteria surviving in other hostile environments, but now what is mentioned is with respect to the temperature. So that's all with regard to adaptation. We saw adaptation in different environments, namely xeric environment, frigid environment, hostile environment, and aquatic environment, and we saw all these environments offer stress to the organism and how they cope. They cope up either by behavioral means, morphological means, physiological means, or biochemical means. Now something almost similar to adaptation, that is acclimatization. What is acclimatization? It is almost similar to adaptation, but you should not confuse. It is, just remember this, QPR. It is a quick physiological response to a stressful situation. So it is not morphological, it's a physiological response, and it is done quickly to cope with that stress. So once again, what is acclimatization? It is a quick physiological response to a stressful situation. A very good example is altitude sickness. What happens when we go up high altitudes? When you climb up a mountain or climb up a hill or visit a hill station, once you reach there, you experience something called altitude sickness. What are the symptoms? Symptoms are fatigue, nausea, that is feeling of vomiting, as well as heart palpitation. You feel your heart beating fast. Why this has occurred? Because at high altitude, the pressure, atmospheric pressure is low, and therefore the oxygen available in our body is very less or insufficient. No sufficient oxygen is present in our body, and therefore we experience all these symptoms. So once again, altitude sickness is a sickness we acquire when we go up high altitudes where the pressure is very low. As a result, the amount of oxygen in our body decreases, and we develop such symptoms like fatigue, nausea and heart palpitation. We experience it, but how long do we experience it? Do we experience it for days? No. This slowly we get acclimatized, slowly we get over this, or we cope to the situation. This sickness, altitude sickness, do not last for a day, or do not last for some hours. Slowly we cope to the situation. How did we respond? It is a physiological response, and it is quick. It need not take days. It is quick. Slowly what happens is, not slowly, quickly our body produces RBC. So the RBC count increases. Second, affinity of the hemoglobin to oxygen decreases, and the breathing rate increases. So we cope to the situation by these physiological means. Once again, RBC count increases. So the number of RBCs that are produced increases, affinity of hemoglobin to oxygen decreases, and the breathing rate increases. Therefore, we compensate the oxygen that is insufficient, and we cope and repair that situation, and again we do not feel that sickness. This is the reason why when you cross-check the blood sample of a tribe living in high altitude and a person living in the plains, you can see they have more number of RBC, or the RBC count is very high for them, or the hemoglobin level is high for them. It's not that they're taking nutritious food or food rich in iron, etc. It is because of this. To cope with that environment, the body has developed physiological means, that is, the RBC production has increased. That's why the blood samples shows variation. More RBC count in the tribes of the altitudes and lesser comparatively to the people of the plains. I hope you have understood acclimatization, which is a quick physiological response to a stressful situation. A very good example is altitude sickness. There are many other examples, but what is quoted in your text is altitude sickness to explain acclimatization. I hope you have understood both the topics, adaptation and acclimatization.